Hey, everybody, welcome to Journey Through the Generations. And we're back with another episode in a series we're calling Reflections of Our Journeys. And it's a series for us to reflect back on our research
Hmm.
journey, genealogy
Yeah.
journey, with the hope that it inspires you. It gets you to thinking about your next step in your research and kind of gives you some tips on what to do.
Right.
So today's theme that we're going to talk about is newspapers. So, Trisha, how
Yes.
has newspapers impacted you in your research journey?
Well, newspapers is a subject that I could actually talk about for hours upon hours. But I know this is going to be a short podcast. But newspapers have always been important to our family. Um, in my research, I have discovered that there has been 5 generations of my family that has written in newspapers, whether it's been um, editorials or actually worked for the newspaper. So it went back to an article that I found, an editorial I found of my great grandfather, Wayman Denson, in the St. Louis newspaper. About he wrote an editorial about segregation in the movie theaters, and then his daughter, my grandmother Gladys Denson Mays, wrote for the black newspaper in Arkansas, the Arkansas State Press, for many years, and also our local newspaper, the Newport Daily Independent. And my mother wrote, was a reporter and later an editor of that same newspaper, the Newport Daily Independent. I worked for the Newport Daily Independent when I was in high school, and I also took pictures for my college newspaper at the University of Arkansas, The Traveler. And most recently, my nephew also wrote and took pictures for his college newspaper when he attended Grambling State University. So we have a long, rich history of working and giving information to the public through newspapers. And that's something that I never knew until, I started doing this research.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I don't think I knew you had so many people.
Yeah.
I knew it was a lot, but not that many.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my dealings with newspapers is a little bit different from Trisha's. Mine is more along the lines of the information that you can find researching newspapers. So, and most people, I think, always only think about newspapers as looking for obituaries. And that's
Yeah.
a good place to look for
And
obituaries.
wonderful
Nothing
source.
wrong with that. But you can also find other information about about your ancestors. And so, for example, I am I using you? I'm using your account.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that, but
We're married.
but yeah, we're married. So I've been using Genealogy Bank to research newspapers for my family in Arkansas, and so I was able to find some information in a small black newspaper called the Arkansas State Press. It was based out of Little Rock, and it's not in operation anymore. I want to say it closed in like 1960
Yeah, it was
ish,
the early 60s.
something like that. And so I was able to find some information in the Arkansas State Press about my family. So there was a little section of the newspaper called Around Town, I
Yeah.
think it
That
was.
was, yeah.
And they wrote about the comings and goings and of people as they left Little Rock or came back to Little Rock. And it would often say who was traveling, what they were coming for, and who they were coming to see.
Right.
And so I found several instances of my grandfather coming back to Little Rock to visit his mother. And it had all of their names in it. And I was able to figure out that his mother name was Josephine,
Right.
which I didn't know before. And then and it also gave me a sense of where he was in a particular year.
Yeah, like a timeline.
Yeah, it's a timeline of kind of where he was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to get some information from that as well. So yeah, you don't, the newspapers can be used for more than just, finding obituaries.
Right. And a lot of people think that because, I say vital information, marriage, death, and divorces. You can find all of those in newspaper because they're, public information. But there's also, because back then, sometimes the newspaper was kind of like the Facebook of today. Who went where? Who did they go see? What did they eat? Things like that. So newspapers are a great source of information. They give you names, they give you dates, they give you everything that you would ever need to know in a article back then. And we actually have a whole podcast, like a 30-minute podcast dedicated to newspapers. If you want to go back and listen, it's episode number 9. And I talk more about some things that I have found in newspapers and how I have found them. And because newspapers was actually one of the first resources that I used in the beginning of my research.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and it's more than just that. I mean, depending on who your ancestors were, you may find just regular like newspaper articles about your family.
Correct.
They could be talking about, I don't know,
military history.
Yeah, military. There's, your ancestor was in government or a big deal in the schools or anything like that.
They may have written a book about their family and then local newspaper covered it. Yep. You just never know what you
would
can
never
find.
know. You would never know. And in that article, it may have, instances of where they say something about your family that could help you along the way. And if not, it's a good story to tell and to keep along with all of your records. Mm-hmm. So when you are ready to tell your story to your family or write a book or whatever it is, you have all that information.
Right, because there's going to be one person to say, how you know that?
Yeah.
And then you can say,
true.
The newspaper.
Especially if it's something kind of scandalous.
Right.
So yeah, definitely use newspapers in your research. Don't forget about them. Genealogy Bank is not a sponsor of us.
Unless you want to be.
Yeah, of course, unless you want to be. But it is a good resource to use. It is a subscription-based service, and it also does not have every single newspaper in the country.
No, it doesn't.
So you are limited on what you do. But hey, tip, we always give this tip for subscription-based services. Look for the free trials.
Right.
Sometimes there's a 7-day trial. Get that and pick 7 days that that you can research, every day or whatever.
Right.
And get as much use out of that 7 days as you can.
Right. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, all right, everybody, I think that's going to do it. Go back to episode 9 and listen to our newspapers episode. We appreciate you guys for listening. All of our social media contact information will be in the show notes of this episode. So please go like and follow, subscribe to the podcast, tell your family and friends about the podcast. We would really appreciate it. All right, we're going to get out of here. Guys, y'all take it easy. Stay safe.